Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Declo podcast. This is our new series called the Founder Series. And today's guest is a good friend of mine, Chris Evans, who is the co-founder and chief product officer of Instant.io. And everyone, say hello. Hello, Chris.
Hello, good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I couldn't resist a cheesy intro there. But for those who don't know Instant.io, I'll let Chris give an introduction of the company and then himself, and then kind of talk about a bit of that journey, and then we'll dive right into the questions then, Chris. Sound good?
Sounds awesome. Yeah, so I guess Incident.io, first of all, we are an incident management company, to put us in sort of the neatest and smallest possible box. If you look at what we actually do, we do everything from managing your on-call and making sure we wake people up when something goes wrong, right the way through to, organizing people when everything's on fire and, your website's down and your database is exploded. And then right through to the sort of like actually understanding what is going on at your organization when you look across many incidents and sort of drawing themes and learnings and sort of essentially like helping organizations turn, I guess, like failure into ways to become stronger, better businesses, that sort of thing. So that's the sort of very pithy pitch. Me personally, so my background is like broadly in engineering. So went through the ranks of like software engineering, running teams doing software engineering, and then drifted sort of semi-accidentally into platform sort of engineering stuff. So most recent place I did that before starting this company was this company here, Monzo in the UK, which is like scale up bank. And I was running a relatively small team when I joined. And then when I left, it was like a whole group of multiple teams looking after all of the AWS stuff, all of the databases, all of the queuing systems, all of the on-premise data centers, like broad remit. And with that broad remit came up, honestly, a ton of incidents. None that were particularly bad for, or very few that were particularly bad for customers. There were some. But broadly, that was my exposure into like really, really caring about actually turning incidents into positives. So everything from like, how do we think about the regulatory impact because we were regulated as a bank? How do we think about customers because obviously they want access to their money? Myriad of other things on top of the kind of routine, like how do engineers fix the things? So that's broadly my journey that led me to founding this company with two other people I met at Monzo. And we can dive into a lot of that as and when we jump into the conversation.
Nice. So then we'll dig into some of the background and inspiration then for Instant.io. And, what was the spark or the aha moment that led you to start the company then?
Yeah, this is quite a fun story because I have always wanted to build a company. I've always it's like, been dabbling with computers my whole life, like programming from a young age, and was always like, yeah, it'd be amazing to turn that into a company. But if I go back to like the sort of the beginning of the origin of this company, so I at Monzo, as I said, was like very involved in incidents, and I ended up writing as sort of like an evenings and weekends type project, this product internally called Monzo Incident. And it was this kind of like acknowledgement of like workflows being this very complicated, incidents being this very complicated like workflow problem to solve. And I was like, right, well, imagine if we could just run everything on Slack and it was as easy as a slash command to kick something off. And then all of the sort of weird, quirky organizational rules that we'd normally have to follow. So like if you're about to put the status page up, go and ping this team. And if you're going to do this and do, I just encoded it all in code. And so I wrote this thing, ended up getting, it was built originally just for the on-call engineers I was working with to make things a bit easier, but ended up being used by the whole organization. And so, it would be like CS would be using our customer support team, would be using us to declare incidents about customer support only. So they'd be like, oh, we're understaffed. We need more staff here. Like loads and loads of sort of incidents being declared there, but sort of all small things. But I never really sort of put two and two together of like, want to run a company, have built a thing that has sort of provably worked at this organization and decided to turn it into a company. And so it was actually the two co-founders, Stephen and Pete, who took the idea, and they sort of came to me like a month into dabbling around in the idea, and they were like, hey, we're doing this thing on the side. It was like COVID, but like feels weird to do this without talking to you, given you wrote the software at Monzo. Like, how do you feel about this? And I was like, oh, great to see that you're turning it into a company. And sort of went back and spoke to my manager, the CTO at the time, and he was like, why are you not just going to ask them to go and join? Like, obviously they'd be delighted to have you. And this company, I almost didn't join this sort of company in the early days out of sort of sheer Britishness, and like it isn't the thing to do to go and muscle my way in. Anyway, long story short, I spoke to Stephen and Pete and was like, listen, if there was a world in which maybe I could perhaps like be part of this thing, and they're like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And so that was sort of, that was way early, like pre-customers, pre sort of doing anything. So there from almost the beginning. But yeah, that's sort of how things came to be here.
I love it. And one thing I've never asked you, Chris, is how did you divvy up the roles? Like obviously between Stephen and Pete, like obviously you're chief product officer, someone CTO, and like obviously I'm assuming you've all got engineering backgrounds. You
Mm.
know, was that a difficult conversation, or was it just like a natural fit for each of you?
Yeah, we just rock, paper, scissors it and figured we'd go with that. No, it was actually, I think one thing, so this company, like I didn't actually know Stephen and Pete very well before starting this company. Like we'd sort of crossed paths, but Monzo was a reasonably large engineering org at that point. So there's like many reasons why like the three of us as co-founders like wouldn't have worked out. Like there's plenty of people I've worked with in the past who I've sort of come into contact like that, and they haven't been people I'd be like, I want to sort of, hitch my wagon to you and work with you every day forever. But things have actually worked out like incredibly well, and that I would sort of consider them best friends at this point as well as co-founders. And we've had a relatively easy ride, I think, as a founding team in that regard. So the titles conversation, it actually came about. We were out sort of like marching the streets of London. We sort of went and saw, I think, like 3 or 4 VC firms on in a day. This is when we were doing our seed round. And so we sort of done that, and we were like, well, book a dinner somewhere. And we went for dinner at this restaurant called St. John, I think it is. And we sat down. We were like, we're gonna have the titles conversation. And Stephen was like, I'm just gonna put this out there straight away. He's like, I would really love to be CEO. I love all this fundraising stuff. I really wanted to get to like do all those sorts of things. And Pete and I were like, brilliant. Neither of us want that. Pete has a background in engineering management, more experience in engineering management than me. And he was like, I have sort of always thought I would be CTO. And I was like, absolutely, I would like struggle to sort of come up with anything different. And I was sort of the slightly awkward one who'd been doing all sorts of like weird shaped roles in the company. So I've been doing a lot of sales and a lot of this and a lot of that. And I worked with Pete a lot on product. And like my background is I have strong affinity with like incidents and the product side of things. And at the time we were like, don't really know what title it will be. And I was like, I honestly didn't really care. I'm not super like high ego, need to have a C-level title. And I think, in fact, I will probably like relinquish the CPO title at some point in the future. And then essentially, like it was a few months later that we settled on CPO for me, just based on what I was doing and just making it essentially early days. It was like make sure that when I'm out pounding the phones, talking to people, that it feels like I'm sort of plugged into the what we are doing and not just like random co-founder kind of thing. But I would really struggle to sort of position myself as a CPO at this stage of the company. Like I'm running marketing right now, I'm doing customer success, and I'm still dabbling in sales. So I expect I will be co-founder at some point in the near future when we eventually get to the point of needing a real CPO in seat.
Nice, makes sense. And then, so what were some of your biggest influences or mentors when you guys were starting out?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it sort of sounds a bit cop out, but like I think Monzo was my first exposure to sort of startups that I felt really like I resonated with, and I resonated with the founders. So like Tom and Jonas. So Jonas was my manager for a little while. He's the CTO there, and Tom Blomfield, obviously CEO. Like I don't know. I think looking at how Tom ran that company and everything he put into it, I think it was like the company was really like built around Tom's brand and Tom's vision for it. It was what it kind of felt like. He was the effusive leader who'd stand up in, the all hands meeting once a week, and everyone would just like whatever he said, everyone would hang on to that. And his ability to like land a message and sort of a theme of what the company was going after was just like second to none. Like I remember when I joined the company, it was like unit economics. Like how do we make Monzo the most efficient bank so that we can run a bank account for an individual for a small amount of money? And it was at the time not in that position, and so sort of burning a lot of cash. And I just remember everything he sort of every time he did that and stood up and did one of those things, it became a sort of internal meme and was landed so well. So that was like one angle where I was like, followed in that kind of vision. And then I think Jonas honestly was like, I don't know. I always appreciated him. He was one of those. He's very very direct, no bullshit kind of leader. Like he's a German guy, and he'd just be like, I don't know. He always sort of managed to just cut through all the crap of all of the things, and like I don't know, get to the core of a problem. So those are probably my, I think I'd look at those as like less maybe like mentors or anything else, but people I'd look up to and sort of building my sort of founding journey a little bit more in their image.
Nice. So, taking it back to when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you were younger? Did you always want to be a founder of a company? And how did that evolve into starting a company?
I mean, I had no idea really what founding a company was when I was a kid, I think. So, but when I was younger, what I really, really wanted to do was to be an airline pilot. And then I had an eye test at like the age of 8 or 10 or something. And it was like, you have color blindness and there's no way you could ever be a pilot. And I was just like, dreams shattered kind of vibes. But yeah, I don't know. Like I really didn't know what I wanted to be until like I said. So my journey was like went through school. I then went to uni and did maths because I was like I have no idea what I do, so I'll do something super generic. And then I got to the end of that degree, and I was like, it's so generic that I don't really know where to take it. And so like the options were like go and do something like accountancy or tax, and like I was just like so like disinterested in those things. And so I ended up doing a master's in computer science, which was like honestly the best year, one of the best years of my like academic life. And that I'd gone from like maths where I was like, it's really, really hard. Like it's really hard and it's really dry as a subject. It's not very exciting into computer science where it was like, oh my God, I'm really good at this. And so like consistently like getting top marks across the year, then got like a prize at the prize at the end of it, distinction. And I was like, this is the thing. And it was like, so then got into a role of software engineering. And then, yeah, I think it was like, it was, I don't know, it was like, it was during like those early years of like software engineering. I was like, oh, maybe there's a future where I could like build a company. But like, again, struggled for an idea. And I was like, that was always the thing. I was like, you need to be one of those creative types or like really foundery founders that you see, the Mark Benioffs and the Jeff Bezos types. And I'm like, well, I'm clearly not those. So I'm not going to found a company. And so I don't know, I sort of never really had it in the back of my mind that it was a realistic kind of ambition, more a sort of maybe one day if the right thing came along kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the formation of a company finds you rather than you finding it.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting how many people just accidentally find themselves kind of finding a niche, and that kind of probably ties me to my next question: was there a particular problem or challenge you wanted to solve with Incident? I know it's probably fairly obvious, but there may be some of our audience that don't kind of associate yet. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I mean there was, and I think you're absolutely right with the like, people. I think if you look at most founding journeys, it's people who go through experiences of things and then their own like personal experience in a domain leads them to be like, well, there's nothing that solves this in the way that we're doing things in this day and age or in this niche or whatever else, or AI's come along and like I think I can apply it to this thing. For us, it was essentially like there's no shortage of like companies that do things around incident management. It's not a new concept, but like if I look at the companies that do it, like ServiceNow and PagerDuty, like none of them were kind of built or keeping pace with how organizations were doing things. And so like I like literally by virtue of the fact that I built an open source tool to actually run our incidents is kind of testament to like there was enough in it and there was enough of a problem to be solved that wasn't being met by those things that I was going to invest my weekend time in it. And so I think that's really what we're trying to solve here. It's just like bring a kind of a known discipline up to scratch and standard of how people operate businesses today. Like people are much more distributed. People want to work in a certain way. Like trying to pigeonhole incidents into being like an engineering tool, which is really how they're sort of thought of in reflection of like existing software. It's like not how most organizations work today. So like our viewpoint on this is like incidents impact the whole organization, your whole customer base, and therefore need to engage the whole organization. Like so building software that is sort of cross-functional and sort of accessible to someone, as accessible to someone in customer support or risk and compliance or an executive as it is an engineer, is super, super important. So that's kind of, I guess, like that's the kind of pithy way of articulating what the problem is we're trying to solve here.
nice. And then taking us back to the early days, what were the early days of your company like? Any funny or memorable moments?
Yeah, I mean, well, so we were founded sort of partly out of boredom during COVID, boredom and this like little market insight that we had from the product we built with Monzo. But like early days for us were it was brutal, probably the most brutal schedule I'd had in my career up to that point. So it was like 5 to 9. So 5 a.m. in the morning, we'd all congregate on like a Google Meet or Zoom thing. The three of us we'd do that until 9, and then we'd switch from like personal laptops into Monzo laptops because we were building all of this whilst we were still there, and then do the 9 to 5 at Monzo, and then do the 5 to 9 in the evening of like more stuff on Incident. And so it was just literally soaking up every single hour of the day, and trying to balance like the context of like I'm sort of between 9 and 5, I'm thinking about regulatory compliance and audits and banking and millions of customers. And then outside of that, I'm thinking of like, how do we keep our first 5, 10 customers happy while sort of also trying to sell things and do marketing and things like that. So I think it was like, that was my memory of like the first few months of building this company. And there's some hilarious pictures we got floating around of like just all of the places I ended up falling asleep. So I'd just be like, Joe, my wife, just sort of made it sort of sport for her. It was like, how many times can I catch Chris just like asleep somewhere, like some old man that just drifts off every now and again? I think that was pretty similar across all three founders too.
I love that. I love the whole kind of bootstrap, the hustle that comes from it. And obviously I've known you a while and known of Incident, and I think it's really good for a British company, to see a modernization on probably a topic no one's managed to crack as instance. Like obviously it ties into like business continuity, DR. These things aren't glamorous, and I think the kind of approach that you have taken is to really simplify that, and really make it cross-functional so people understand. I mean, like I remember seeing, not that I'm kissing your arse here, but I remember seeing the demo of it back when in the flow days, and seeing, we were discussing it, and we were like, Slack. I'm like, oh my God, we live like 90% of our lives are in Slack, and seeing that kind of progression of things, and people that weren't familiar with incidents just being like, okay, I know what to do, click here, that's it, done, or it passes to this group, the triage happens quicker. And I think that really helps your things that mean time to recovery and everything else. But anyway, I digress. I'll go on to the next question about I can't believe I'm going to ask this because it's so obvious, right? Is like, how did you come up with the name of the company, and were there any alternative names that you considered?
Yes. So that there were, it wasn't like an easy one to come up with this. We sort of had a little Notion doc full of all the various options, and we did the classic, like, here's what we'd like, and then jumping on like Namecheap to check like domain names and what's available and stuff, and like wanted either a .com or a .io, and Incident.io wasn't actually available. And so we ended up pouring, I think it wasn't even that expensive, but it was like certainly not like, $100 sort of cheap. It was many thousands of pounds is what it was. And we had no funding at this point. So we were like, it's quite a big investment to go and jump into this while we're trying to figure out if it's a thing. But we did that, bought Incident.io. Pete ended up sort of reaching out to the person who was selling it and was like, oh, I'm just thinking about using it for a side project kind of thing. Because obviously the second you go to anyone and go, hey, I'm building a company, I really want your domain name, they're like, brilliant. Tens, hundreds of thousands. So that's how it came about. But the fun story is actually when we were incorporating, when we were sort of going through the sort of documentations of like turning us into a limited company, we had to have a name at that point, and that predated any conversation around the like domain and things like that. And so we were like, we have to pick something. What are we going to pick? And so we were like, we have to pick something that is going to force us to change it, because if we'd done something like, oh, we'll register as like First Responder Limited or something like that, it's going to be a bit harder to change, and there's like the kind of, well, maybe we stick with it. So we are actually incorporated in Companies House as Pineapple Technology Limited, just as a kind of like forced to have to do it, which is all well and good, and like doesn't appear anywhere until we do sort of a DocuSign to sign people up, and you sign Netflix up for some large contract. And the procurement person is like, who the hell are we spending this amount of money with who is Pineapple Technology Limited? So, yeah, that is our official name, trading as Incident.io.
That is absolutely horrendous, but I love it.
Yep, it is bad.
Amazing. And then, like, talk me through if you can share a story about a time when something went wrong early on, and how did you handle it?
I mean, it's like how many things have gone wrong. There was a fun story actually when we were closing all the legals out for our first funding round, and as part of that, so Monzo had been like really great to us in that they'd let us. So like, you know how when you work at a place, normally people will be like, if you end up doing any kind of external work, it's the property of the company and like we own it forever kind of thing. And we were aware of that and we'd gone to Jonas in the early days, the CTO at Monzo, and been like, listen, we're going to build this thing, but if it's a problem, we won't build it while we're at Monzo, but we will probably leave to build it. And he's like, listen, it's fine. Like you do that, all good. So he was really great about it. And then when we came to also we had an email which was like, anything you build, even if it's on Monzo, when whilst you're working at Monzo, is your own property, blah, blah, blah. So we went sort of with this email to the legal people when we were closing the seed round, and they were like, that is entirely unwatertight and will not hold any kind of credence. Like they could still, they're like, you need to get what's called like an IP assignment. I think it's called an IP assignment clause or deed or something. Anyway, so we had to go back to Monzo, and at this point Jonas was on paternity leave, so it was a little bit more complicated. We were like, can we get this thing signed? Anyway, it was fine. Like they were good about it, but it was like dealing with lawyers on both sides to try and get things done. And there was a time when we were right near the end of this, and I ended up replying all on an email that I thought was entirely internal with our legal counsel, but was actually a thread with everyone on both sides. And unfortunately, like hadn't said anything particularly bad, but it was sort of one of those things where it's like probably best kept to one side of the thing, and did that. Fortunately, nothing bad came of it. Everyone sort of saw it as it was fine. And I guess that the learning from that is like just I don't know. I tell everyone this is like everything you write down, just assume one day it will come out in some disclosure somewhere. So do not write anything down that is, you would be unwilling to say in person to someone or have sort of disclosed publicly. But yeah, I mean, there's so many other things we could choose from. There's incidents along the way that we've had. There's things that have gone on with customers, but it's kind of, I think that's just like par for the course when it comes to founding companies.
Nice. And I think, shout out to Monzo, I think, for being decent. They could have been really difficult about it. And I think it's testament, obviously, another good British company, and I'm a customer of Monzo, so it's good to hear. Although we're getting dumped. I'm only kidding. So, so what was the most unconventional advice you received when starting the company, and did you follow it?
So this is a really tricky question. I don't think we got any advice that I would consider to be like unconventional. I think everything we got, like we surrounded ourselves with like good investors, good angels. Everyone was pretty smart, and there was no sort of like wacky or wild ideas. I think things that maybe felt controversial to us at the time, but looking back are just entirely obvious, was like, I remember like getting advice around pricing the product, and people would be like, you should be 10x the price that you are right now. And we were like, come on, man. And at the time we were slinging deals for like $99 a month, and I'm like, this is amazing. We've got like,
I know, honestly, where was that deal when I needed it? I'll tell you, that would have made life so much easier at Flow, and then we could have just had it in the background, and then
yeah. But yeah, I think that's like the only stuff that, I mean, it felt controversial to us at the time, because you're like, and I always think it's hard to look back on retrospect and go, yeah, well, obviously people were willing to pay more for it, because you kind of forget that the product's growing all the time. And that was, I think if I reflect on it, like actually we did a reasonably good job of sort of, the kind of goal of every company is to sell something that you think is a fair value exchange, which is like, we should feel like that, what you're paying is, valuable to us, but also you should not feel like you're over or underpaying. It should be like, the goal is to meet in the middle. And I think when you're building products as fast as we were and sort of continue to do that, just means that the value that we deliver is sort of keeps on going up, and the goal is not to try and like monetize the hell, like we're not greedy, but like, yeah, I don't know. So I don't think there was anything I don't know, I wish I had a really good, like, someone gave us something super unconventional, but it was all very, very sensible in retrospect.
Good. And then kind of digging more into the company culture and the team. Talk me through how you would describe your company culture in one sentence.
Do you know, I really hate these. This is the kind of question, when you get
It's
asked,
like a job interview, isn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. It's like when you're in an interview and someone goes, do you have any questions for us? And they're like, how would you describe the culture? And I'm like, oh man, it's like if
it's on the website.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I guess it's like, what do you mean by the culture? Because it's like, if you back out the culture of a company to be like, what are the beliefs and sort of the ways that they act and the things that they do and the things that they value, it's sort of, very hard to distill down. But like, I mean, to give you a sense of like what we kind of care about here. So there's a few things. Like, we value pace as a sort of a thing across the company. So like, one of the main competitive advantages we have over all of the incumbents in the space is that we are far more agile. We are able to sort of operate quicker and sort of get things to market fast. And that means we can learn fast and build fast. And sort of that's a flywheel that is like huge for this company. And that's not just in like, it's not just in like product, because everything's very easy to be like, oh yeah, just ship product. But it's like everywhere. It's like marketing. It's like, how can we do the smallest possible experiment to learn as fast as humanly possible to get things done? Grit is another thing, which is like, I think startups are just like, certainly our flavor of startup feels like unfathomably hard at times. And people who thrive here are people who just have that kind of, grit your teeth, kind of just get your way through it. And sometimes that means you just got to click buttons faster or just work a bit longer and things like that. And it's like that is like a very deep cultural thing. Because for some people, they're like, I want a 9 to 5, and that's totally fine, right? It's like it's probably not the right fit for you. And then ultimately, like, we're quite a low ego company, I would say, and that stems from the founders. Like, none of us are particularly sort of like, must be front and center or whatever else. And people generally in the culture here is like, celebrate like collective success over like individual accomplishments, is like the sort of the short way to say it. But yeah, those are the sorts of things. I don't know if it's like wildly different to other startups, and it's definitely not one sentence. So I have failed to answer your question, but hopefully sort of distills a little bit of the way that we think about things.
Nah, it's all good. And I know it's one of those cheesy, optimistic questions, but I think, if anyone's looking at this and they're looking to work at the company, then I guess they'll get a sense of kind of actual realism rather than this kind of, perfume sprayed nonsense where you see a lot of companies bigging up their culture. In reality, like, no one's really living their values, or no one has that bootstrap mindset. But anyway, so digging into the some personal insights then. This question, honestly, I might remove this for future episodes, but what's the most unusual place or situation where you've had a great business idea?
Good question. I mean, like, I think at this stage I struggle to like disentangle running a business from like everything outside of running a business. So like, constantly have, like, whether it's like on vacation with family and I'm on the beach and I'm sort of just like, my brain is like ticking over. But to sort of keep it to a specific thing, I think so. In the very early days of the company, before we'd hired anyone, we did our first like founder offsite, and it was like, just take a few days off, go somewhere, spend uninterrupted time in a room, sort of think about things. And so we ended up booking an Airbnb out in the Wye Valley, which is like the border of England and Wales, middle of absolutely nowhere. And we found this little like Airbnb. It was like tiny little cottage, and it had this had like a sauna outside, not as fancy as it sounds. It was like an outdoor shed sauna type thing. But it was middle of summer, and we were like, we'll go and do that. And so we ended up playing a game in the sauna, because we had so many decisions to make in that stage, like strategy things and like product plans and all this kind of stuff. We invented a game called Hot Seat, which was essentially the three of us would go into the sauna with a topic that we'd have to come out with a conclusion on, crank up the heat as hot as it would possibly go. And it was like, no one leaves until we've made a decision. And it was great. And I feel like more companies need saunas to, drive these kinds of things. But like, joking aside, like, actually ended up working really well for us, just to get a
Amazing.
bunch of things down on paper. It was good.
Amazing. I love that. And then, like, if you could have dinner with any three entrepreneurs, dead or alive, who would they be and why? Or you can just pick one. Yeah.
Yeah, this is always a good question. First of all, I'd pick alive founders, because I feel like dead ones would be, a
Not
bit
much
down
for
on the,
conversation.
yeah. I don't know whose joke that is. I can't remember. There's a comedian who makes that joke.
Yeah.
Maybe Gervais or something. But no, it's really interesting. This, like, often like, talk like, I'm fortunate enough that I get like occasionally plugged into like quite well-known founders, like through investor networks or something, or whatever else it is. And I think it's always interesting, but it's not always useful to talk to these other. So like, you look at it and you go, oh well, I'll talk to a Jeff Bezos because look, he built Amazon, and if I could get dinner with him, learn a ton of stuff. And the thing you find is like, everyone sort of has this like they're set in where they are right now, and looking back to sort of like put themselves back in what it was like when they were a similar sort of stage to you is really, really hard. So you always get this kind of like rose tinted advice of like, yeah, well, Jeff Bezos just said, it was all about being frugal and X, Y, and Z and like operational efficiency. And I'm like, yeah, but at the time, what was the advice that you would have given, kind of thing? But anyway, I probably would pick Jeff Bezos just because it'd be fun to talk to someone who has just like done that well and seen that much and such a like insane impact on the world. I think Mark Benioff is another interesting character in that, like, has sort of turned very sort of unsexy software of like sales CRMs into something so absolutely humongous. Like, it's insane. And like, obviously, like, positioned the whole world of like, stop buying software on CDs kind of thing. And then like, I think if I look at like more realistic people that would be really, really useful and I think fun to hang out with, like, I look at like Wiz as a company that is like I mean, we've spoken about this in the past. Like, I look at them as like just the absolute bar of like company building at the moment. I mean, obviously they're doing phenomenally well, like fastest company to 100 million, and like Google giving them quite large acquisition offers that they're turning down. And I think like I'd look at them and I'd go, well, they have so much like product chops. They have like, they're so good at marketing. The whole kind of execution just seems so tight. And so like hanging out with them over dinner, and also like they're not a million miles away, obviously doing markedly more than like Incident.io at this stage, but like they're not a million miles away in terms of stage. It's sort of, measured in single digit years type thing. So I think would be interesting. I don't know. So that's like there's more controversial people I could pick, but I've sort of tried to steer clear to avoid muddying my name or the name of the company. Though if you want to push me, I could go down the more kind of controversial route and give you those as well.
Entirely up to you. I mean, if you want to go there, it's up to you.
Let's do it. So maybe it's not that controversial. I would probably invite Elizabeth Holmes. I don't know if you know the Theranos story.
Yeah.
So I watched the thing about that, and I know she's in prison or facing criminal sort of convictions at the moment. But like, I just think it'd be fun. It'd be really interesting to go and talk about that story.
And the
She
question
seemed
would be, Chris, would you change your voice as well? Would
I
you lower
would. I
it?
would drop it a few octaves. I'd be like, "Hey, how are you?" I'd have Elon Musk as well, just because I'm not a massive super fan, but I think the guy is just like super interesting. Like, you know, I mean, he's killed my favorite social media platform, so I'd have some words to say.
Yeah.
But that'd be a good one. And then the final one would be like, I don't know if you've seen, there's a show on Netflix, Running with the Devil, the John McAfee story,
Oh
and like,
no.
I had no idea how wild that was. And so I think that would be probably, score highly on the like entertaining and like, need to go and have a shower after dinner to kind of cool off kind of thing. But yeah, there we go.
But it sounds like like the next installment of The Hangover.
Yeah.
It's like you'll end up with those three. God knows what will happen to you. But no, I like that. It's not entirely controversial. I mean, each of them have made a success in some capacity. Yeah, albeit controversially. But
Who would yours
yes.
be, Leo? I'm curious. Who would be your top person?
Um, I tell you who my least person would be Bill Gates.
Would it now?
Yeah, less said about Bill Gates, the better, in my opinion. I don't know. I've never really thought about it. I guess ask me when we get out of stealth.
Oh,
So
nice. Nice little teaser
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah, there we go. Probably won't happen, or I'll implode, or I'll just get busy with something else. But
Yep.
yeah, ask me then. But that's that. I actually need to prepare three in case someone else asks me that again. But um, nah, nah, I'll save it. I'll save it. Yeah. So, yeah, moving on to my actual favorite part of this is the challenges and successes. And a couple here that I wanted to ask you was, what's the biggest risk you've taken with the company, and how did it turn out?
Yeah, good question. I don't think we've been like particularly risky as a company right from the very beginning. So like, for example, even like personal risk in the early days, like there's a lot of people who, when they're founding a company, make that leap from, employment into founding with a sort of small pot of cash and like, fingers crossed and hope it works out. And we were really fortunate in that we had like quite a few paying customers before we left full-time jobs. And I mean, that had its own challenges at the time of trying to like balance running a company with customers and running a full-time job. But so I don't think we took any risks like that. But like if I look at, I think like the risks you take in founding a company are like all the one-way doors. So if you look at everything you can walk back on, you can basically go, well, it's low risk because worst case, you just back out that decision and you go and do something else. And probably the biggest one-way door that we took in early days of this company is like, do we bootstrap this thing and turn it into a little lifestyle business and sort of more chill for the rest of our lives, or do we go down the VC route? And I mean, like I think we had very good rationale for doing what we wanted to do, which is like, this is, it's going to be a hard problem to solve for a, sustainable amount of time if we try and bootstrap this thing. But it was a big, like, it has lots of consequences, that kind of decision. Quite big ones really, which is like, founding a company, going on the VC route, the expectations just go through the roof. What success looks like goes through the roof. You get on the treadmill and suddenly you are now expected to deliver on a number of different things. And there's no sort of like, oh, well, we could just peace out now kind of exit from this point. It's like people have given us lots of money and they want returns justifiably. We also want that, right? Which is like, and so I'm now pushing myself. And so, yeah, it's, I think that's probably, I guess that's like the biggest like one-way door type risk that we've done. It's sort of, and it nets out in a good place, right? Which is like, we're now on a very exciting journey. We can employ many, many people. We can go and really, really take the market by storm. But the kind of, I guess the downside of that is, the kind of work, family, exercise, pick two. I think when you get on this route, it's sort of like pick 1 or 1.5. So, you end up very firmly like work is life. And that's all the kind of tensions, I guess, you have to pick up along the way.
Yeah, and I mean, at what point in your life do you kind of look back at that and go, oh God, I should have maybe spent less time involved in a company or more time with the family? And it's like I don't think anyone that we've had on the podcast has the kind of, I don't know, the answer to that kind of splitting that up. I guess, when you're running a company, you're 100 miles an hour, certain things get impacted, and I guess when you get to the finishing line, then you can obviously divvy up that time. But I don't know. I don't know how you do it, to be honest. But anyway, and then what's the one failure you've experienced that it's turned out to be a blessing in disguise?
Sort of, yeah. I don't really know that there's. Don't really know there's like one failure I'd point at. I think like as you mentioned is there, like if you look at like where you end up at the finish line, if you assume like now is the finish line, I think then finish line in the present, if that makes sense, then kind of there is just so many failures along the way that have led to this. It's like, I don't know, it's like looking in incident management, right? You'll often do things, and it's quite a reductive view, but it's like people will look for like the root cause of failure, and it's never one root cause, right? It's never the person who pushed the button. It's all the other sort of things that sit behind that. And I think if I look at where I am today, like where I am today is like the product of not just like one thing or whatever else, it's a whole set of things that lead along the way. And so I think that's like broadly, it sounds a bit trite, but like, wherever you get to is like product failures. And I've had bad jobs in the past, and I've had bad times in the past, and I've tried to get jobs in the past and haven't got them. And like, you could look at all of those and go, oh, those are like doors that shut, or they're like the sort of eternal optimist view is like, all of those are like doors that led you to the place you are today. And so like the way I look at like success and failure is broadly like, am I happy with where I am today? And if I am, then sort of just trust that all those failures that led to this place are the right ones and sort of good ones that got me here. And I can rationalize that and go, I am pretty happy where I am today. Like I run a company with a bunch of really, really smart people, have a good home life with a wife and 2 kids, and like maybe the balance there is a little shifting from time to time, but like generally it's all good. So I don't know, I don't think I could point out like a single failure and go, oh, it was that one that really really shaped me kind of thing. It's sort of many of those all along the way.
Nice. And then, so as a co-founder, Chris, how do you handle criticism and setbacks? Like, do you have a kind of go-to method? Do you solutionize with the other co-founders? Or do you just embrace it because that's just part of who you are?
Yeah, it's really hard, honestly. I think like like founding a company has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And there's lots of, I mean, someone described it as like the highs are really high and the lows are really low. But there are times of building this company where, you just get like repeatedly punched in the face. So, you're in the middle of like a really, really key deal, closing, some company to use your software. And then they go, oh, well, we're actually going to defer it by 12 months. Or, and then at the same time, someone's like, hey, I'm handing in my notice because I want to go and, do some other career or something. And, and then all the time you're trying to like figure out a new domain, right? So I'm in the middle of trying to like for the last 6 months been like upskilling on doing marketing, and like all of those things just like get added together, and you can just get to this place where it's like I can't catch a break at the moment. And I think it's times like that where I feel very, very fortunate to have good co-founders who are also good friends who I'm in like, I mean, I WhatsApp Stephen and Pete more than I WhatsApp my wife, is the honest truth here. And like that's really like we often talk about like out of phase kind of sine waves. So you can, you think of like when someone's down, it's rare that all three of you are down. And so someone's there to be like, right, no, we can fix this. This is good. And so we spend a ton of time together. So even though we have sort of defined lanes, I guess, where we're responsible for things within the company, everything is quite shared and lots of problems are shared. And so it's very rare that it's like, go figure this out and, just deal with it yourself. It's a good tight unit, I think we have, which is honestly, I look at people who found companies solo and I'm like, I just don't know how you do it. Like, I don't know. I assume they must just surround themselves with good other support networks elsewhere. But like the benefit of having two other people who have absolute context on almost all the things that I have. And so there's no sort of like, let me lay the groundwork for you so that you can help advise me kind of thing. I think it is a massive, massive, massive win for us.
Nice. And then talking about the achievements then, so what's the one achievement you're most proud of since starting the company?
There's so many, but I think like working with Netflix is pretty much is pretty high on the list. So I mean, like I could point out a bunch of like Netflix and Etsy and HashiCorp and Airbnb. Like these are all like absolutely like iconic engineering brands. And I'm like these people now pay my company for the software that we write, and it's like super, super validating. I think it's validating in the first instance when relatively unknown companies pay you for your software and you're like, oh my gosh. But like when I can, talk to my mum and be like, huh, if Netflix stops working behind the scenes, they'll probably be using my software to like fix that. That is pretty awesome. But there's so many other things in here. Like there is I could look at PagerDuty as software I've used pretty much the entirety of my career as a piece of software. It's been an app on my phone.
Yeah.
It's no longer an app on my phone because we have built a product that's literally going toe to toe and replacing that in a bunch of organizations. And there's so many other things, but yeah, I don't know. Like I think it's helpful to like I do sort of reflect on this stuff when times are tough, and I'm like, it's not so bad. Like you're paying 70 people to work at your company, and you have great companies telling you they love your software. So I don't know. It's good, but there's a ton. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of where we're at.
Yeah, I actually remember the first engagement I had with you guys, and we were using PagerDuty, and I actually said to my team, and I might actually cut to a clip and get someone to say, I remember that day, and I was like, these guys are going to take over in this space right now. If it's not going to be in the next three, it'll be 5 years from now. And it's interesting that you're like from your point of view, you're going toe to toe, and the fact that obviously you've secured some, I mean, mammoths, is incredible. And I'm like I'm beaming with pride for you. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense, I'm like
Mhm.
that's an amazing achievement. And again, it's that kind of whole ecosystem where anybody that's building a software related company wants to be involved in that ecosystem. So it's pretty cool. And then obviously recently, you guys raised some money. Talk me through some of the advice on how to raise some funding and things to avoid, because everybody loves to hear these stories, right? How you get back, what's required. You can go into as much detail as you want. Again, you can keep it short, but it's when I'm watching YouTube, I love to hear these stories. And
Mm.
shout out to a channel called EO. who does amazing founder series, and it was a huge inspiration for this. So yeah, talk me through that.
Yes, we've been like super fortunate in that like I guess like our fundraising strategy has been to say no to people repeatedly, and then people just like seem to want to give you more money. And so that I think that was true of like the seed round. Like we were really fortunate that we went out to like raise a seed round with paying customers, a working product. Like it was sort of like some small degree of PMF, so product market fit. And so like in that world, it's raising capital when you have something and they're like, right, this is not sort of, a lot of people will go out and raise a seed round on like have a grand idea, and that's totally fine, and that's totally like the normal path. We were a little bit ahead of that, which made things a little bit easier. Super fortunate though to get Index as investors, and Point Nine, another firm who invested in us, and then a bunch of angels. Like it was an oversubscribed round, like felt very, very lucky. Kind of expected though. You have customers, you have revenue, and you have founders who are, confident being able to talk about the grand vision and things like that. So that was that. Then Series A was the round we closed. We closed it last year. I think. Gosh, I'm losing track of time. Yes, not super recent, but recent enough. And again, that was one where we weren't short on capital. We weren't sort of like going out to market to go and do fundraising. Kind of Stephen's job, part of it as a CEO, is to maintain relationships with people, and he talks to a bunch of different investors all of the time. And that stuff naturally leads to, when people start to sort of sniff that there might be something to do and something happening in the market, everyone wants to preempt and try and get in first. And so a few firms ended up sort of talking to us quite seriously and wanting to do the Series A and lead the Series A. And as it happened, Index also had sort of seen what we were doing in the seed, and obviously them being on the board, they have all of the insight, and they were desperate to get in and sort of stake their claim, and so they ended up leading the Series A as well. And so that's where we are at the moment in terms of like funding journeys. Pretty well capitalized for the time being, so like in the kind of good position where we can just say no to people. But yeah, it's always interesting. Like I don't love the fundraising side of things. I always find, I don't know, Stephen's really good at it. He's great. He can sort of talk at the sort of the level that they want to understand and stuff. But I always enjoy ending up being on the calls. So we often do a lot of stuff as like three founders, and you'll get brought into like investment committees rather, and you've got 15 faces around a giant boardroom sort of on a Zoom call looking at you, and you have to sort of present the grand plan for what you're going to be doing and things like that. And it's always a little intimidating. But it's quite exhilarating too. Like when you come away and you're like, I think we did a really good job articulating that, or like you get questions and you have all of the answers like ready to go kind of thing. It's a pretty good feeling. But yeah, fortunately we don't have to do that anytime soon. So we're sort of because the other thing is it's a massive distraction. I don't think people appreciate how much effort goes into raising a funding round when you do this. So it is not a case of like throw together a Google Slides presentation and go and tell everyone about your grand vision. Certainly when you get to later stages, like we'll be going into with like a Series B, this is, what are all the results? How is your GTM machine working? Are you, is marketing producing, good growth for you? Do you have a repeatable sales machine where you can hire more A's and SDRs and that turns into more revenue? And like, what's the grand product vision? How big is the market going to be off the back of that vision? Like, all of these things come in. And so there is so much data analysis. There is so much thinking, so much like having to like clearly articulate this stuff. And so you're talking like this can be the kind of thing that will take you out for weeks or months to get it in a good state. And then obviously there's all the kind of talks you have with investors and things. So yeah, it's quite a lot. But yeah, so grateful that I don't have to worry about it for the time being.
Nice. And then you'd spoken about the Series A, and typically with the Series A, for people who don't know, would that be your opportunity to effectively help the company ramp up, hire specific roles, or focus on R&D? Kind of just talk me through, yeah, essentially what you would do with your Series A.
Yeah, I think if you look at it like seed is generally I have an idea and I need some money to sort of prove it out. Series A is like the idea is working and we want to prove that we can turn this sort of company that's sort of manually cranking the lever into something where it is a bit more systematic. And so, I've built a sales org and a general revenue org that actually works, and I can prove that I can pour more dollars into this machine and more dollars will come out the other end. And so it's that sort of scalability, repeatability, and the vision and the plan is still sort of all there. And then a Series B would be like, great, how do we throw absolutely tons of capital to scale that to the moon? And that's the sort of like, massive ramp up kind of thing. So we're in that slightly awkward like teenage phase, I think, at the moment, where it is like the graphs are all going up, things are feeling really good, but we haven't quite escaped the manual cranking of like sometimes founders need to just jump on and do all the things, or sometimes we haven't quite nailed the like how do we 10x outbound efforts to make them work, and a whole bunch of things there. But sort of, I guess like we're at least like at stage 2, which is like we're aware of where the problems are and we sort of know a rough sort of direction to fix them. And so yeah, it's broadly like getting that stuff in a good shape. So when we go for a Series B, it's like people are like, great, I'm confident these folks know what they're doing and that they can scale all the various parts of the orgs that they need to.
Nice. And is there something like a micro and macroeconomic element that you need to consider before that kind of leap towards Series B? Or, is that something that you as co-founders you discuss? Because listen, the world's in turmoil at times, certain things are happening, inflation, again, you could have maybe, let's just say 50 customers in a pipeline, then the Federal Reserve makes a cut or increases interest rates or whatever it may be. Are these sorts of dynamics that you need to factor in as a co-founder?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate in that this is mostly stuff that sits on Stephen's plate as sort of his
Yeah, I
thing
thought
to
as
own.
much.
But like as a founding team, obviously we have to be across this stuff. I think there's so much that like you can't build sort of with your hands over your ears and not listening to what the rest of the world is doing. And so the market conditions are really important. But there's also the kind of like you don't know a lot of stuff, and so you can operate to the things you do know that you have to do as well. So good example would be like we probably need to have 2 absolutely stellar quarters to go out to market, and then from the product side either need to have proven traction in some new direction that we think is going to be powerful, or some new product line or whatever else, or at least the audacity of zero and a great idea that is kind of like people can buy into the vision kind of thing. So yeah, I think there's like a ton of factors that go into this, and this is the kind of stuff that as a 3 we'll discuss periodically. But yeah, I don't know. It's like it's easy to end up like looking outwards so much that you end up kind of driven by urgency of the market kind of thing. And I think it's just always going to be hard to predict this kind of stuff.
Makes sense. And then you've mentioned vision and future, and we jump into that then in terms of, how do you envision the future of the industry in the next 10 years?
So like it's a very, very interesting question to answer in like the time we find ourselves in now. It's like if you were to ask me have asked me this like a year ago, wouldn't be thinking anything even close to where we are, with all the advances in AI and all the kind of things going on there. And so like I think honestly, like predicting where things will be next year, you can sort of do it based on like what you know about the technology landscape today. And that's one answer. But there's also like, well, if the pace of change continues, like there could be entire paradigm shifts into how we deal with things. And certain businesses could end up being entirely killed because they're replaced by like generic AI type things. So I don't know, but I think given what we do know and what we have planned, like we are firmly heads down in kind of solving a bunch of what we would describe as like workflow problems for large organizations. And so incidents are one of those, which is when something goes wrong, how do you make sure that the organization knows how to do all of the right things and sort of encode that and lead people down the path. And that's just like super important for large organizations where it's very hard to scalably do things consistently. And I think if you look at all of the other places in organizations where they need to be able to scalably do things consistently, there's a ton of opportunity for us to go chasing after some of that stuff. And I look at this and go like, this is not like a super novel idea. This is essentially what ServiceNow ended up doing, which is, if I have a policy at my giant bank, which is that every employee gets a new laptop every 2 years, like that is that is a workflow problem to solve, because it's like when you have 10,000, 20,000 staff, how do you keep track of all of the laptops, and how do you have the policy and procedures that means that, you know, tech ops or your IT org are shipping out new, all of those things. And it's like, well, that is a workflow that you could solve for an organization. And somewhere someone's like, that's incredibly valuable, because the alternative is employ, you know, a team of people who have to manage this stuff. And that's like one example out of hundreds that these organizations have. So that's like one area, but there's honestly, there's so much still to be done in the space that we're operating now, which is, there's so much inefficiency. And like, I've had this my whole career, like so much inefficiency around like the operating, like technically operating engineering organizations. And so a really pertinent one is like, you know, alerts. Everyone has alerts and everyone has things, and you'll know this from security background, there's so much signal. It's like, how do you help organizations find like the signal, sorry, the signal from the noise? There's so much noise, right? And it's like, you need to cherry pick that stuff out. And there's a bunch of ideas we have that will be, I think we'll be really, really well placed to solve there. So I don't know, a bunch of ideas. It's more formulated than my sort of incoherent ramblings, but yeah, we know roughly where we're going next.
Nah, I think you know, one element you're touching upon is obviously the emergence of AI and how it's just exploded right the past couple of years. You know, something like AI, I guess, could read the incident types and then kind of predict, you know, common themes or elements that, again, the platform could tell people like, hey, you're having a central problem here with this same thing. Maybe
Mm.
you need to, I don't know, expand. I don't know, maybe you need to look at different clusters or whatever it may be. And again, it's like, could be able to look at the processing capability of an organization and say, you're going to throttle here. So you actually need more cores or you need certain things. And I don't know. And then things like consumption models, because if there's too much consumption, it creates instability.
Yes.
If you haven't obviously set up the appropriate load, but I don't know. I might have just added a few more digits onto the valuation of the company there, Chris. And
Yeah,
you know,
I'm stealing that idea, but no, it's a
there you
really, it's
have
a really
it.
good one. It's a really good one, which is like, um, I think if you look at like the value you can get from using good incident management software, it's like number one, it like makes individual incidents better, but the real goal is like, what can it tell me and help my organization to improve proactively? And so there's all sorts of things like the ones you mentioned, which is like, you know, can you spot capacity constraints inside of a system? And those capacity constraints could be like technical things, but they could also literally be like, are we spending too much time reacting to stuff going wrong versus proactively building the things that are valuable for this company? And so I've historically always done this manually. So I would, when I was running like platform teams, you look at like on a quarterly basis, you go pull all the incidents, try and like categorize them. We go, turns out we're spending about 20% of our team's time fixing shit that's going wrong with Kafka. And you go, great, well, maybe this is the time that we have, that's like a signal that we should proactively invest in, like making that a little bit more reliable, because an investment for a quarter pays off, you know, however long kind of thing. And there's so much stuff that we can and are starting to do in that space. And I think that is where it becomes not just valuable for these sort of ICs and people dealing with incidents at the kind of front line, but like CTOs, CISOs to be able to spot things. Like I speak to a lot of like people at that level, and they're like, honestly, I don't care about individual incidents. They're like, they'll be the bad ones where I have to get drafted in. But really, what I want to know is like, where are the risks in my organization? Like, what are the things that I should be given a heads up about, that I'm currently relying on some lossy mechanism of like engineering leaders that are underneath me to sort of surface up. And if they don't, I wouldn't be plugged in. So
Yeah.
that's that. I'm super bullish on that being like a good direction for our company. Like the data we have puts us really well placed to be able to solve some of that stuff.
Nice. And then if you weren't running the company, what do you think you'd be doing?
Honestly, I think like the default path for me was like more of what I was kind of doing prior to this, which is like, you know, I was running all of platform at Monzo. I ended up drifting into like regulatory compliance stuff there, which sounds really dull and really dry. I actually really enjoyed that intersection of like trying to like marry up like the reality of how tech teams work with how like, you know, regulation kind of worked and stuff. And it's important stuff. But I think if I wasn't doing this, would be probably looking for like similar companies where I can do similar things to what I'm doing here. So whether it's like a founder or a VP inside of a sort of a youngish startup, like I've kind of got a bit addicted to the hustle and the kind of I don't know, I like the kind of unknown nature and the variability of the roles kind of thing. So I think I struggle to see a world where I'd go back and do 9 to 5 ish kind of job. I think I'm quite in. But I could probably see a world where I take a bit of a break from like being, ultimately responsible to just being like a VP supporting a great founder kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, nice. And then, so how does the company stay innovative and ahead of the competition?
That is a killer question. I think it's honestly one of the hardest things, not just for us, but like for most companies in this day and
Yeah,
age. In that, if essentially if you have a product and someone can install it themselves and trial it, which most companies do these days, there's very few companies really that are like, you have to come and talk to us to do the thing. So, that's not us. So you can install Incident.io as a small team and get started yourself. That essentially means there is no secrets. There is no way to sort of innovate quietly and sort of keep all the secret sauce behind closed doors. And so you have to assume your competition is able to see literally everything you do. And so that means that they are able to copy everything that you do. But I guess when it comes to staying ahead, I think there's like two axes. I think you can kind of measure this on. There's like one which is like technical innovation and features, whatever it is that you kind of tangibly have. And then there is like the innovation you have, which is like market insight, your vision as a team, how authentic you are as founders. And I think technical innovation, as I said, is like basically very hard to defend against. Like we are at the very core, we are a very boring SaaS product, right? We have JSON flying around over HTTP, and we have UIs, and we have buttons and things, and we plug into Slack, and it's like there's no like great technology insight there, right? It's like, what have we done with those things to get there? And I think the edge that we have carved out is like how good the product feels. So we put a ton of time into the design and the UX. I think that's stuff that often gets missed when competitors sort of, looking to the side to sort of copy you. They'll go, well, I'll take that thing there, and you go, aha, but you didn't think about how that flow goes through all this, and so it ends up tripping people up over the sort of the longer time there. But the other side, like where it comes to vision and authenticity and those things, I think those things are much, much harder to copy, almost impossible. It's like saying like, a junior engineer saying, I want to be a VP. How do I acquire experience? And you're like, you just do it for a long time, and then you get to become that person. And it's like you can't shortcut that stuff. And where I think that plays to our advantage is between us as like a founding team. Like we've been through working at many different organizations, many different sizes, in many different roles. And so between us have like a ton of collective experience of like not just incidents, but like companies and operating and things like that. And I think that means that when push comes to shove and you're talking to large organizations and they're deciding whether they want to, like, it's not just monetary decisions, it's like they're buying into a company based on, where it's going and what's happening there. I think that is where competitors and folks are sort of struggling to keep pace. Basically, I would back myself to go and talk to some head of a giant bank about, how we'd be able to help them improve incident management and operational efficiency and things a lot more than someone who sort of is their first startup out of YC and they sort of have come at it from like that's AI incident management type of thing. So that's broadly how I think about it. But it's like super, super front of mind for us because it's scrappy and, you will find people who care, more about cheap prices or very specific engineering nerdy things, and they'll choose a competitor. And we value sort of working with people who want to level up organizations, and so it's sort of a lot of give and take. But yeah, kind of I guess like the flip side of all of this, actually, without trying to ramble too much, is it's also very easy to get caught up in looking left and right at the competition too much. And there's something that as a founding team we try and it's a fine line to balance, so that you want everyone here to be sort of a little stressed that we shouldn't rest on our laurels, but you don't want everyone going, oh my gosh, like company over there built this feature, we should build that feature. It's like, no, if we believe in the plan that we have, we should build that, and we should sort of trust in that. So yeah, I don't know, it feels like I've given you a very sort of word vomit of things here, but like that's
No,
roughly think about it.
no, I absolutely love it. I mean, essentially what I take from it is be you and be simple.
Yeah.
How many companies just overcomplicate it, or
Mm.
they throw 50 different features at you when you're just like, for example, CTOs, CIOs, and CISOs are extremely busy people. They just want something that's going to plug and play. So, that makes sense. I'm actually just going to ask you two more questions, Chris, because I'm conscious I've had you on for a while. So we'll go with something we'll go with something fun, right? What's the weirdest or funniest customer feedback that you've ever received?
Oh, um, we we get a lot of feedback, I should say. I'm trying to think what there is that's, and it's a mixture of good and bad. And I put that, I think that's really, first of all, that's really, really good. If you're building a company, I think good feedback and bad feedback should be valued equally as like equal markers of success.
Yeah,
The worst case is no feedback because people are entirely apathetic. I remember getting in the like, a year in, I remember getting an email from a really sort of grumpy CTO. And it was sort of like one of those like angry, but also sort of happy feedback in that what they were trying to do at their organization was move the organization from Slack to MS Teams. And they basically came back to us and they were like,
madness.
yeah, I know, right? And they came to us. It was at a time when we didn't support MS Teams. We do
Yeah,
now. And they came back to us and they go, "My engineering organization showed me your product, and now that has put paid to my plans to move us to MS Teams. So we're moving the whole organization back to Slack to be able to work with your product." And so
wow.
it was this kind of like your product's so good, but you really annoyed me because I had this plan that was in flight kind of thing. So that was a fun one to get, and yeah, ended up speaking to them, and they actually gave it in good humor, which is good. But it always fun to get that.
Superb. I mean, it did the right thing, I bet, in the end, anyway. So, and the last question then, Chris, how do you define success both personally and for the company?
Yes, don't what do I think? I think like I am not, we've spoken about this actually. I think we spoke about this over dinner one time. I am not super motivated by money. So success for me is not like driving a Lamborghini and having a mansion. Like, yes, I would love to not worry about money ever again. And I probably wouldn't pick a Lamborghini, but I would love to have a very, expensive car and sort of those sorts of things. But I like if I reflect on like times I'm sort of most happy at this company, uh things like, seeing the people, and this is going to sound really, really trite, but seeing the people who work here and being like getting to walk into the office in the morning and be like, there are 70 people here who, work at this company. Or, I get an email from a huge customer who's like, we had a massive incident and you've hugely impacted in a positive way how that went at this company. Or myself personally developing and being like, I understand all of the various discipline and part of marketing, and that's amazing. So that those are all sort of, I guess, like markers of success. I guess like purely looking at like outcome wise, like I want this company to sort of endure. I don't want it to be a flash in the pan. I want it to be something really, really big. I want it to become like the kind of thing that every engineering organization has heard of. And so that is sort of one marker of success. But I think we spoke about this earlier. Like I think the tension of all of this success stuff is the balancing how that all kind of marries up with family and home life as well. So to sort of anti-success would be that the company does phenomenally well, but I have missed my two sons growing up, or
Yeah.
I've been sort of an absent husband to my wife, and so I look back and go, I missed about 20 years or whatever else it is. So I think for me, success is company has done really well. I've done it in a way that I enjoy, and I've sort of retained all of the relationships and felt very present. And it's sort of been something that's allowed me to have, a better home life, not a purely kind of negative and sort of stolen one, in that way. So yeah, I don't know. That's roughly how I think about it.
Ah, nice. And then on that note, then, Chris, again, thank you so much for your time. Thanks again for your insight, sage advice, and I hope that many people are receptive to this. And also, we'll plug instant.io in the description. We'll give you a shout out as well. And then, yeah, for anyone who is looking for any incident management tools or looking to, I don't know, maybe change it up, reach out to the incident team. I'm sure they'll take care of you and everything else. So again, everyone, like, share, subscribe, and thanks again, everyone. And thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Leo. Good to chat.